if a grotesque amalgamation of all your former coworkers was actively hunting you down inside of a remote Arctic mining facility, what would you do? Our heroes are out of time, out of options, and worse yet, almost out of ammo. And while ordinarily that might be a death sentence, the one thing that they do have on their side is knowledge. They know how this creature operates. They know it can be killed. And if they really put their heads together, they might know how to kill it. I'm going to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the Carcass Chimera in ZYGOTE. Barclay is an android, an unfeeling corporate automaton who exists only to serve. And that's really good news for our guy Quinn here, because just about everyone else would have undoubtedly left him for dead the moment they saw the extent of his injuries. I know I would. Anyway, we join our protagonists just as they arrive at some kind of dining facility in what's left of the Cerberus Minerals Far North mining operation. Based on the intro, these two were the last surviving crew members out of the original 98. It's unclear whether or not they're aware of this fact, but between the power fluctuations, streaks of blood, and generally ransacked interior, it should be plenty obvious to both of them that things are not exactly going great. From what I can tell, things started falling apart more than a year ago, as evidenced by all the photos we see on a pillar during the opening shot. If you look closely, you can see a small scrap of paper beside each picture containing both a date and a location within the facility, with the earliest being January 2061, with the latest being December of that same year. My guess is that this was someone's way of tracking when and where each of the bodies was found as the situation unraveled. Thing is, there's only 34 photos that are actually visible during this sequence, and since we know that there's been 96 total deaths from the time this mess popped off, I think it's safe to say that the majority of carnage took place rather recently after things suddenly hit the fan. So, what the hell happened? Well, during his exposition dump, Quinn said something about those things being cobbled together out of animal parts by someone named Holbrook. He then goes on to explain that this same Holbrook guy hacked up a bunch of miners to make something huge. And then he finally references some big rock being cut open and releasing a light so insanely bright, our guy gouged his own eyes out right there on the spot. Nerds, do you ever notice how certain smells can spark memories or inspire creativity? Like how the scent of fresh ink can take you back to the excitement of starting a new sketch or project. Well, this month I've been exploring some intriguing fragrances that not only ignite my senses, but also enhance my creativity with the help of Scentbird, a fragrance subscription service that lets you try out a variety of scents without the full commitment. Each month, you get to choose from over 900 authentic designer and niche fragrances. You receive a generous 8 milliliter vial, which lasts 30 days, perfect for about 120 sprays. It's been fun experimenting with scents that complement my daily activities, whether I'm hitting the gym, in script writing mode, or out and about for the day. This month, I'm trying Icy Fizz by JUS. It's got that addictive sparkling smell that leaves them hanging on your every word. I also have Awakened by Toomey for whenever I need to exude confidence and male energy to strong-arm those crooks at my repair shop. A few quick tips on how to get the most out of your fragrances. Always apply to moisturized skin, helping the scent last longer. Spray on pulse points. A little spritz on your wrists, behind the ears, or even your chest brings out the best of the fragrance as you move throughout the day. Whether you're brainstorming the next great app or hanging out with your friends, there's a fragrance out there to match your mood and personality. If you're ready to discover your new favorite scent and get a personalized experience, I've got an offer for you. Snag 55% off your first month when you use my code NERD3 or scan my QR code on screen. You'll get your first fragrance for just $8, and the next month it'll be only $16.95. Experiment with different scents without committing to a full bottle. Use my code NERD3 to unlock this sweet deal. And drop whatever scents that you nerds got in the comments. Of course, without providing a timeline, it's difficult to say when exactly each of these things took place, but based on the information presented, I think I have a good idea of how things played out. It all starts with the light. Quinn says he first saw it when they cracked open a rock, but it was most likely present to a certain extent well before this. You see, the light isn't a physical light, but rather a mental one being beamed straight into people's minds. We know this because Quinn claims that he's still able to see it even after removing his own eyeballs. And he also believes it's what instructed Holbrook to start whipping up the meat monstrosities. I think that at some point about a year ago, the miners unearthed the aforementioned rock and brought it back to the facility, at which point it started sending out some kind of telepathic signal that got a hold of Holbrook's head. Once under the rock's control, he began slowly harvesting body parts to create additional combat forms for it to control. A couple lab rats here, some livestock there, and even the occasional coworker whenever he had the opportunity. This is what ultimately happened to the 34 Cerberus employees that we saw during the introduction, which is why their deaths were so spaced out. I mean, think about it. If Holbrook had taken them out all at once, someone would have almost certainly caught him in the act. And the same goes for the livestock. That said, I find it pretty hard to believe that the operations leadership would not call for help after the first few deaths. Again, there were only 98 people here to begin with, so each subsequent loss of life would come as a major blow to both their workforce and their bottom line. Nah, this goes well beyond mere corporate greed. If I had to guess, some or maybe even all of the mine's higher-ups were likely being controlled as well. Once on Team Rock, they would have started restricting outbound communications and doing whatever they could to cover up the murders and disappearances. Oh no, Johnny didn't get his brain scooped out in the generator room. We just transferred him to a nice mine upstate, where he's got plenty of room to run around. A likely story. This explains why all the photos were taped up in the mess hall like some Charlie Day conspiracy board. After an entire year of getting the runaround from management, the remaining crew members started piecing things together themselves. But by then, it was already too late. Having finally assembled his Frankenstein army, Holbrook would suddenly unleash his sickening creations upon the unsuspecting miners, with each new death freeing up more and more biomass for the freaks to repurpose. So yeah, it's basically Dead Space. Miners find an evil space rock needs bodies to possess, compromised leadership, mad scientist, you get the idea. And of course, just like those aboard the Chimera, the Cerberus crew didn't last long once things started getting crazy. Maybe a few days at the absolute most, at which point, the only ones left were Barkley and Quinn. Also, I think it was Holbrook's monsters that broke the rock open. Initially, I was thinking that the miners did it, and this is what brought the creatures to life. But since we know that Quinn cut his own eyes out immediately afterwards, it must have been fairly late in the game when this took place. Otherwise, how could he have survived the initial attack? You expect me to believe the blind guy made it out when basically no one else did? Forget it. And plus, the way he talks about the creatures, it sounds like he must have put eyes on them at some point, which naturally wouldn't have been possible if he didn't have eyes. Whatever the case, it's clear that the space rock is driving this madness, but then why would the creatures want to crack it open? Well, based on Quinn's testimony, it sounds like there's some kind of giant quartz crystal inside that serves as a source of the signal. If that's the case, chipping away the surrounding rock was probably meant to expand its AoE, but that also makes it vulnerable. So, assuming we can even get close to that thing without getting our brains scorched, we might be able to end this nightmare once and for all. Then again, we aren't exactly operating from a position of strength here. A brief survey of the food stores reveals less than a day's worth of MREs and bottled water. But even more distressing is their limited ammunition. His Space Tavor is down to only 2 30-round mags, meaning accurate shot placement is an absolute must. This'll be pretty difficult given his severe case of missing eyeballs, so I can certainly understand why he'd want to pass the piece to Barkley despite her lack of training. That being said, teaching someone how to shoot in the midst of an emergency is less than ideal, especially when there's no time to practice. So we'll want to make things as simple as possible for her, starting with muzzle manners. Before we ever even hand Barkley the unloaded rifle, we'll explain to her that the barrel must never be pointed at anything she's not willing to shoot, and until a target is identified, it should remain pointed at either the ceiling or the floor. Once she understands this, we'll move on to the trigger guard. guard, explaining that her trigger finger does not come off the frame of the rifle until she's ready to fire. And as for the trigger itself, we'll tell her not to press it until she's absolutely certain that she can hit what she's aiming at. Once that's all out of the way, we'll then demonstrate how to hold the rifle to get a proper cheek weld and sight picture while looking through the optic, which in this case is an NC Star Advanced Dual Optic 3 to 9 power piece of shit. Seriously though, who the hell is putting airsoft grade Chinesium on a $2,000 rifle? This whole operation's gotta cost billions. You're telling me they couldn't shell out a little extra to get their security staff some EOTechs? Well, whatever. The good news is that the ADO has a built-in flip-up red dot sight on the top of the housing, which Quinn should have absolutely deployed before turning Barkley loose. After all, it's gonna be super tight quarters from here on out. And while 3 power magnification's not totally unusable, having a simple red dot would make for significantly faster target acquisition and follow-up shots. Of course, none of that matters if Barkley doesn't know how to run the rifle in the first place, so after racking the action a few times to make sure it's unloaded, we'll slide it across the table and let her get a feel for it. We'll start with dry firing. The key to good marksmanship is in learning how to squeeze the trigger without moving the gun. Unfortunately, Quinn won't be able to tell whether or not she might be flinching, so we'll just have to hope that she's a natural. And last, we have the manual of arms.
Now you killing. Close it up. No, you ain't.
Yeah, it's a little bit more involved than that. I'd have her return the rifle to me so I can explain the moving parts and show her how to load it, insert the magazine, push, pull, draw back the charging handle, and release. Once she gets the picture, we'll show her how to safely unload and to pass it back to her to repeat. We're not going to be able to watch her progress, but as long as she ejects around when she's finished, we'll know that she did it correctly. Also, we'll want to point out the bolt release lever behind the mag well and explain how to use it after replacing an empty magazine. Sure, she could use the charging handle as well, but novice shooters have a tendency to ride the action forward, which could prevent the bolt from locking into battery, and it's faster. Now, keep in mind, this is nowhere near a comprehensive overview of the Tavor X95, but it's still a hell of a lot more than Quinn gives her. Dude basically just has her pull the bolt back and hold it tight to her shoulder, which is important, sure, but how is she gonna reload if you don't show her the mag release? Is she gonna know not to rest her finger on the trigger while she carries it? And what about the fire selector? Does she even know how to take it off safe? Well, okay, we didn't cover that last part either, but there's a good reason for it. You see, once we're confident she understands everything that we've taught her so far, we'll take the rifle back, load it ourselves, and then set it to semi-auto before handing it back. Oh, but nerd, you say? Isn't that dangerous? Yes, extremely. But let's look at the situation. We're all alone in a maze-like mining facility with flickering lights and a horrible monster that could be literally anywhere. And if that monster should pop out from around a corner right in front of us, we will not have time for Barkley to go shocked Pikachu face when she can't pull the trigger. Like it or not, our shooter lacks the requisite muscle memory to reliably disengage the safety while raising the rifle. So we're just gonna have to eliminate that step entirely. We can still show her where it is and what each position does, but as far as she's concerned...
Well, it's my safety, sir.
And besides, a stock X95 has a trigger weight between 8 and 10 pounds. For reference, a factory Glock is about 5.5, and they don't have a manual safety at all, so what could possibly go wrong? And plus, this will also stop her from accidentally flipping the giggle switch and away the entire mag. For real, the last thing that we need is someone who's never even held a gun before to go full auto their first time. I can tell you from experience, the only safe place will be the target. Anyway, now that we've got Barkley lined out on the rifle, we need to figure out our next move. According to Quinn, their best bet is to reach the so-called corporate vault, which is located in one of the other buildings. Once there, the plentiful food stores and robust security doors should be enough to keep them alive until rescue shows up. Here's the problem though. In almost the same breath, Quinn mentions that the big bad knows everything that they do, likely as a result of harvesting the other miners' brains. So if its ultimate goal is the eradication of everyone in the facility, one would expect it to post up near the last remaining shelter where it could easily ambush any survivors trying to get inside. After all, it almost certainly knows that power is on the verge of failing in the other parts of the complex, and given inland temperatures within the Arctic Circle can drop as low as 40 below zero, loss of central heating would pretty much be a death sentence for anyone left inside. And of course, if hypothermia doesn't get them, dehydration definitely will. It's unclear when exactly backup is supposed to arrive, but Quinn seems to think that it'll take a lot longer than they can reasonably survive on half a bottle of water. So yeah, if the monster knows there's only one place left in this entire base where anyone could realistically hold out for any significant amount of time, why would they expect it to be anywhere else? I'm not saying it's inherently a bad idea, since they clearly can't stay here for the reasons mentioned previously, but have they really exhausted all other options? First question I would ask is whether this place has some kind of motor pool where they could potentially find a working vehicle. If so, is there any other mining operation, settlement, or any kind of human development that might be within driving distance? Well, probably not, since the Arctic is extremely vast, but it's at least worth asking the question, especially when the alternative involves walking into a trap. But okay, if escape is out of the question and the bunker's likely a bust, what else can we do? Well, we could try dealing with the source of the problem, which in this case is either the crystal controlling the creature or simply the creature itself. Of course, we already know that the space rock has some kind of brain beam that incapacitates human targets, but Barkley's supposed to be a synth, so maybe it won't affect her. That said, she is our only pair of eyes right now, so I'm not sure it's worth finding out the hard way that she's not immune. I mean, it's not like she's a Roomba. Chick has to eat and drink to stay alive like anyone else, so there's clearly something biological going on in there. Who knows? Maybe synthetics in this universe are just the lab-grown beef to our A5 Wagyu. In that case, going after the monster's probably a better option. And while we may not know precisely how to kill it, we do at least know that it can be killed. You see, at one point, Quinn mentioned cutting open one of the smaller creatures that Holbrook made from animal parts. So unless the freak willingly rolled over and let them take a knife to it, somebody must have found a way to put it down first. And plus, the way Quinn was talking about them earlier, it's pretty clear that there were at least a few of the things running around at some point. But now both he and Barkley are acting as though the only thing that they have to worry about is the big one made out of people. So the way I see it, the others must have all been taken out. Now, obviously, the one that we're going after is a little different, given it's made from different parts. But at the end of the day, it was still slapped together by the same guy using presumably the same means. So why would it possess some kind of special invulnerability that the rest didn't? I guess we'll just have to find out. In any case, the first step is finding it, which means crossing over to the main colliery. Once there, our best bet will be to feign distress and lure it out into the open so we can get a clean shot. Ideally, this will take place in a long, well-lit hallway or open room where we still have the option to retreat if we can't knock it over. However, if this thing is as smart as we've been led to believe, that'll probably be easier said than done. Well, apparently not, as almost immediately upon exiting the building, our heroes begin to hear generic antagonist noises closing in from behind. Unfortunately, the severe lack of visibility makes this a poor place to post up, but as it turns out, we might not even need to fight this thing at all. You see, despite its tremendous size and raw physical power, the beast can still only enter the various buildings via the airlocks, all of which are locked behind fingerprint scanners. Now, because the monster was made using parts from dead staff members, it pretty much has the run of the place. But if we disable the scanner after using it ourselves, it won't be able to follow us inside. Knowing this, it would have made sense for our protagonist to bring some tape or grease along to cover up the sensors. After all, if their plan was to simply lock themselves inside the corporate vault, what exactly would stop their new best friend from coming in after them? Oh well, we could probably achieve the same result by smearing on a little blood from one of Quinn's numerous injuries. Best case scenario, the rescue team shows up in a couple days to find the big bad frozen up like a corpsicle, but at the very least it'll give us time to reach a more favorable location. And yes, destroying the scanner outright is also an option, although my concern would be the airlock door slamming shut immediately if it detects some kind of tampering. However we go about it, this seems like a pretty obvious and effective means of shaking our pursuer. So it's a little strange that Quinn and Barkley wouldn't at least try doing something similar. Lucky for them, it takes the behemoth multiple tries to figure out which of its many limbs has the correct prints. Stupid freak, should have organized them better. Still, while the delay might have helped Barkley and Quinn create some much needed distance, it's not enough for them to break line of sight. And as limited as their mobility is at this point, our heroes are left with no other choice but to stand and fight. Ah yes, the sparks of impeccable accuracy. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Not only is Barkley wasting precious ammunition by firing in uncontrolled bursts, she's also not even using the sights. Although I can't exactly blame her on that one. The way the ADO's eye box would be bouncing all over hell. Either way, neither of these problems would have occurred had Quinn properly set up the rifle, so that's definitely on him. And yes, I realize hitting a moving target as a first-time shooter would be no easy task regardless of the setup, but it's not like we're dealing with necromorphs here. The thing moves like fat bastard after a night of heavy drinking. Just put the red dot on whatever looks most like a brain pan and apply rounds until the situation improves. Now look, obviously, shoot the monster till it dies isn't exactly a Jimmy Neutron level brain blast, but based on everything that we've learned so far, I think it has a real chance of success. Going back a bit, when Quinn mentioned cutting open one of Holbrook's abominations, he said that they found a bunch of rat brains inside that had been crudely hooked together to form a more powerful one. So, what can we infer from this? Well, if the monsters were like The Thing in John Carpenter's The Thing, they could restructure existing biomass into new tissues and organs to serve whatever purpose is needed at the time. In that case, the rat brains wouldn't have retained their original shape and structure. Instead, they would have been morphed into a single large unit that likely bore no resemblance to the original parts. You see, what makes The Thing so hard to kill is that each individual cell is an independent, shape-shifting organism. Blow off a limb or destroy the brain, and it'll just make a new one using whatever's left. Plus, then you have to deal with whatever part you blew off getting up and running around on its own. These freaks, on the other hand, are merely the sum of their parts. Sure, they probably have a fair amount of redundancy given the sheer amount of bodies that they're made out of, and they can seemingly graft on new parts at will. But if we can take out all the attached brains at once, that's it. There's no coming back. As for why no one else has thought of this, it's possible the big freak was hanging back like the final boss while the little ones went and soaked up all the ammo. It's kinda hard to tell given how weird and jiggly it is, but the thing doesn't appear to have any signs of damage that would suggest it did much fighting, so I'm thinking this is probably the case. Anyway, because Barkley wound up dumping every last round that she had without hitting anything vital, we'll have to find another opportunity to test our hypothesis. She did manage to knock it over though, so at least it gives her and Quinn a chance to create a little distance. And I do mean little. The extent of Quinn's injuries makes it impossible for our heroes to do anything but walk, meaning it's only a matter of time before the patchwork predator catches up for round 2. Realizing this, the company man decides it's time to cut the dead weight, and by that, he means himself. And just to make sure Barkley's half-baked programming doesn't bring her down with him, he forcefully explains that she is not, in fact, a synth, but rather a regular human person bought as a child by the company for use in their Canary program. This is exactly what it sounds like. Cerberus literally sends brainwashed orphans down into buried asteroids so they can die in poisonous gas pockets. But like, why? What world do they live in where it's cheaper to buy, feed, clothe, and house a bunch of expendables than it is to simply kit out their miners with gas monitors? And even if they're worried about encountering unknown space gases that might not be detectable, why not use actual canaries? They cost like $10 a piece, probably even less if you're buying in bulk. I mean, sure, they can't exactly radio in to tell you that they're dying, but we can figure something out. Just put the canary cage on a tethered terrestrial drone and keep a camera on it. If the bird flops over, there's poison gas. Problem solved. Hell, We used canaries in mines until the 1980s, so they can't be that worthless. That said, I think the real gas leak is the one back at this company's corporate office. You'd have to be literally swimming in monoxide to come up with something like this. But on the positive side, the realization that her entire existence is nothing but a twisted lie is just enough to get Barkley moving, and not a moment too soon. Turns out the freak show's looking to recruit, and Quinn's just the man they need. Oh well, at least he didn't see it coming. Barkley, on the other hand, won't have that luxury, and while Quinn might have been nice enough to lend her both his space glizzy and his finger before checking out, something tells me that won't quite be enough to get her across the finish line. In any case, her best chance for survival is to reach the corporate vault as quickly as possible. Were things a little different, I might suggest taking a detour to try and find explosives, or any kind of mining equipment that she could use to blast the beast apart. However, now that it has Quinn's head, there's zero doubt it knows about the shelter and will almost certainly try to beat us to it. In fact, it probably would have been worth using some of the 9mm to ensure Quinn's knowledge of our plans went out with him. Dude said they're explosive rounds, so a single shot would have likely been all we needed to shut him up for good. And besides, he was already on his way out, so why not spare him the agony at taking a bone through the forehead and do us both a favor? Then again, Barkley's probably gonna need all the ammo that she can get once things go horribly wrong. And sure enough, she arrives at the vault door only to find Quinn's fingerprint lacking sufficient status. Guess we'll just have to borrow someone else's. See? Just had to hit him where it hurts. Well, okay, it's not actually dead. Not yet anyway, but the shots clearly left it in some kind of coma while it reroutes brain power. Lucky for us, there's a fire axe on a nearby wall that we can use to finish the job. In my mind, that means smashing that fleshy meat melon thing where this freak keeps its eyeballs. The brains would have been stored inside, as the optic nerve is only a couple inches long. In fact, it's really just an extension of your brain, so it's not like this thing could splice in regular nerve tissue to give it more length. And sure, I guess it's possible that the creature could have a few extra noggins stored inside its abdomen or whatever, just in case the lights go out. But I can only imagine that the more we destroy, the longer it'll take for this thing to get back on its feet. And yet, despite not knowing how long it might be down for, or which of its many hands might contain the right fingerprints, Barkley decides to skip the coup de grace altogether and turn her back on the still groaning monster after lopping off one of its arms. However, sometimes you get lucky, and this is clearly one of those times. And with that, our hero manages to shut herself inside the corporate vault just in time for a happy ending. Except not really, because she didn't sabotage the scanner after opening the door. I mean, come on, do you honestly think you cut off the only arm that had the right prints? Just look at this thing, it's 90% hands, and the vault was obviously set up to house more than one person, so congratulations, you're a box lunch now. Eventually, the monster's gonna get up, lumber over to the scanner, and work its way through the keyring until it finds a match, at which point, you'd better pray to Zalman Shebs himself that there's another space Tavor in there, or you're joining the crowd. In the end, only one of our protagonists made it out alive. Maybe. However, while Quinn's many crippling injuries certainly didn't do him any favors, his death is really on him for not adequately preparing Barkley. That said, our heroes likely could have killed the monster without even firing a shot, had they thought to trap it outside. And for that reason, I think ZYGOTE was beaten. Thanks for watching, and remember, when in doubt, empty the magazine into the target, preferably in the face. Thanks again to Scentbird for sponsoring this video. Snag 55% off your first month when you use my code NERD3 or scan my QR code on screen.